This can't go wrong with a live stream of the feast happening. I don't want it to reflect poorly on Haliska, not without the context of what's up with her. I'll keep an eye on her, and I suspect General Naltor will too. With the entire world watching our shared meal, I led the way into the Fei Convention Center and prepared to introduce the aliens to the other scientists who'd spent a lifetime seeking proof of their existence. The Nature of Predators 2-6. Memory transcription subject. TASI. Standardized Human Time, March 14th, 2160. The human settled next to me at the table, fiddling with the utensils as if to gauge their weight. He'd spent much of the time while FAI scientists were trickling in explaining basics, which had already been passed along to Naltor and I. Haliska, meanwhile, was doing her best attempt to sink into a chair, while Nulia seemed to be watching the reactions as real-time quality control. I noticed the Gojid speaking up, each time Dustin's words were misinterpreted or unclear to some Bissums. Perhaps I could encourage her to take the lead and get her to open up a little about her personal life. The Terran xenobiologist had seemed like any other person when he spoke of his past as an orphan. You say you were raised by a human, Nulia? I prompted. How did that lead you to become a sociologist and to wind up in this first contact party? Nulia leaned back, hesitating. My home life was difficult at times. It's a long story, but I wound up living on Skalga, home of the Venlil. Hold on. I thought Dustin was from Earth? He is. He was forced to evacuate from his planet, like many other humans, due to unforeseeable events. Don't ask me. Stayed with the Venlil as a temporary refugee and wound up getting permanently adopted, without his adoptive mother encouraging him, and a part-time job studying wildlife with the exterminators. Another long story. I doubt he would have pursued his passion fully. If you'd like more details, I suggest you ask him. I apologize for getting sidetracked. I was asking about you, Nulia. We'd like to get to know all of you. There's not much to tell about me. I had a lot of resentment toward my own people, and the human soldier that rescued me also got stuck, caring for a Venlo friend. Slanek, his name was. He had a few years where he got better, before there was nothing the doctors could do. Once I understood what was happening, I didn't want to be around and watch that decline. Poured myself into studies, to graduating and getting far away from Skalga. I started learning Vrit before I'd ever gotten my certificates. Perhaps that's a selfish motivation. You don't want to open up to people because you're afraid of losing them, I guessed. That's understandable. That's for you to judge. I was one of the youngest Gojids to graduate with a degree in whatever my personal issues, I can assure I'm both qualified and stable enough to analyze your society. I'm not worried about your qualifications. I've just started to get this crazy fantasy in my head that we could become friends. We could bond. I'm happy to get to know more about Bissums and see where it goes from here. Do you ever just people watch, Doctor? Just look around and make observations like you're some omniscient narrator? I can't say I do. Perhaps I understand, Naltor chimed in from a few seats down. Always watch the exits. Counts, you never know when a situation could go sideways. Nulia waggled a claw. That isn't what I mean at all. I just mean you look at a person's behavior and imagine what they're feeling, what their life might have been like. I do that on a microscopic scale, and it follows that, as a sociologist, that's what I'm doing on a wider scale. Any observations you can share about how our development compares to your own? As things stand, you have a lot less outside interference. On a less bleak note, Bissum flightlessness influencing religion is one of the more intriguing topics I've found. How you must have compared yourselves to other birds, to the point of one faith proclaiming that Kale took that ability away from you. Haliska glanced up for a brief moment. I find it interesting that Bissums view it as flight being taken away, rather than swimming being given to them. There's nothing more joyful than splashing around in the waves on a hot day. I'll agree with that. It's too fucking hot here, Naltor commented, gesturing to his Selmer blubber, meant for the Arctic. If there wasn't water, I'd melt into a damn bubble. The Bissums love water, Haliska, but the reason for their comparisons is simple. We often do not appreciate what we have, and we want that which is not within our grasp, Nulia commented, ignoring the Selmer. That's why I've spent so much of my life wishing my mother hadn't abandoned me. despite having a chaperone who nurtured me to the best of his ability. It's natural. I tapped my tan flipper on the table, watching out of my periphery as platters of food were carried into room. I've spent a lot of time wishing that aliens would arrive and solve all of our problems. Do you think that means I don't appreciate Ivrana? I most certainly love our homeworld. I just want it to the best it can be. Forgive my honest answer, but I suspect it reflects on what you believe about Bissem nature. You think that you need fixing because of your flaws. Accepting imperfection is difficult in general, whether it's wishing for flight or wishing for more love in the world. Sometimes it's easier to believe there's a magical fix. My eyes lowered toward the ground, weighing the truth in Nulia's words. Given that she'd devoted her career to studying different societal motivations and her professed affinity for watching people's behavior, I shouldn't be surprised that her assessments were so spot on. While I was a half-hearted believer in hers and an afterlife at the center of Ivrana, I could recognize the validity of Haliska's comment on Kale as well. Instead of despairing at our own flightlessness, we could marvel at how swimming gave us the means to create a society. If we hadn't been driven to fish and circumnavigate the seas, we wouldn't have developed many of our gifts so soon. What would Bissems even be without fishing? Those other alien birds that Dustin mentioned before could fly, but if I could trade places, I wouldn't. For all our flaws, and all my hopes that we can behave in peaceful fashion, there is so much that I love about Bissem culture. We're unique, and blessed to be joining a sea of diverse cultures. Haliska's expression looked a bit queasy as several fish cutlets sat in front of her. That's a real dead animal in front of me, not something grown in a lab. You knew that, Nulia warned. Pull yourself together. Naltor leveled a direct stare at the Thafki. There's vegetable dishes as well, per Dustin's request. Is there something I can get you? No, thanks, the blue-gray mammal murmured. Maybe just no one talk to me for a minute? Please? I need to breathe. The human turned away from his back and forth with AI scientists, who were hanging on his every word. What a bounty you guys have laid out for us. I see that you even cooked one of the trays. That must have been Tassi's doing. You listened when I said we heat our meals. Of course I listened. There's nothing I want more than to learn everything about your species, I replied. I hope it's to your liking. Please, help yourself. As our guests, we'd like you to eat first. Well, I'm not one to turn down something that smells so delightful. I appreciate